Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski kissed the ring, and people are not happy about it, including me. My name is Brittany Page from The Page Perspective right here on YouTube. I am still guest hosting for Jesse while he is in Toronto, Canada. I know some of you asked, which part of Canada is he in? Toronto, for the Future Voters Summit, and he will be back tomorrow. So this is my last day guest hosting with you all. It's been awesome. I have loved reading your comments and seeing all the engagement. Thank you so much for being here. I know Jesse's particularly bummed he couldn't cover this story, so just imagine what he would be saying right now as well, because he's also enraged about this story. So Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski, host of Morning Joe, they did this segment, and I've been seeing this like 2-minute clip that everyone's playing all over the internet, but I actually sat down and watched the almost 30-minute segment that they did with a panel of 5 people to basically convince us that it's time to obey. It's time to find common ground with Donald Trump. So I'm going to take you through that segment and all these different high points, but this is really what we are seeing in terms of, you've heard people say, do not obey in advance. This idea that authoritarians gain their power because it's given freely. And we're seeing that in the media preemptively, before Donald Trump is even in office, telling us that we need to obey, we need to find common ground with Donald Trump. And I'm going to highlight several clips here, but this illustrates how the media is not prepared to meet the moment. The corporate mainstream media is not prepared to meet this moment. And having a panel of 5 people to tell you to obey, it's not good. So let's start with how they introduced this segment.
Okay, so here's where we are. Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we?
So Trump was cheerful, upbeat, and seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. When has that ever happened? When have we ever seen Donald Trump exhibit those characteristics? And what are those issues, by the way? This never comes up. This is an almost 30-minute panel with 5 people, and it never comes up. What are the issues that you talked to Donald Trump about at Mar-a-Lago that he is willing to come together with the Democrats? What are those issues, those divisive issues? You know what I don't appreciate about this entire segment is how they're centering themselves. They're making it about themselves, their own personal conflict with Donald Trump, how long it's been since they communicated with Donald Trump, how fractured their relationship is with Donald Trump. I don't really care about your relationship with Donald Trump. And you shouldn't either, because that's not your job. It begs the question why they even felt the need to have a segment called how Morning Joe plans to cover a second Trump term. Why would it be any different from the first term? Why would it be any different than when Donald Trump first came on the scene? It should be the same, right? Why is anything changing if you've been doing what you need to do? I don't understand. So they go on to defend why they met with him. They cite divisiveness. They cite Donald Trump's big win. And this next clip I'm going to play for you is when they're really pushing hard into this idea that it's time to find common ground with Donald Trump.
As somebody close to Donald Trump told me this past weekend, this is a president who's not seeking re-election, so maybe, just maybe, now could be the time for both parties to get to work. And I know, given the jarring headlines that we read every day, that may seem like a stretch, but think about this. Of the 150 million votes cast, Donald Trump got 50%. Kamala Harris got about 49%. So I don't know. Seems to make sense for leaders of both parties to seek common ground, if it's possible at all. And I will tell you, a lot of Democratic leaders we've talked to this past week, since the election, have told Mika and me it's time for a new approach. And when I say top Democrats, I mean top Democrats.
Name them. Name the top Democrats that you're talking to who want us to find common ground with Donald Trump. This whole thing, again, I keep referencing this almost 30-minute segment, is very light on the details of the conversation surrounding the names of Democrats who believe we should just give in, the policies that Donald Trump is so eager to work with Democrats on, how he's upbeat and excited about it. What exactly are we supposed to be finding common ground on when it comes to Donald Trump and his policies? Is it, for example, mass deportation, his plans to now use the military to round people up and deport them? His appointing of Tom Homan as his border czar, who during his 60 Minutes appearance said that the solution to not separating families is to deport them together. Is it the ending birthright citizenship for children of immigrants? Is it prioritizing tax breaks for the wealthy and corporations while screwing the poor and middle class? Is it the racist attacks? Is it the attacks on trans people? I mean, why would we cede ground to this man? Why would we try to meet him in the middle? Why would we try to find common ground? They keep saying, we want the president to be successful because that's how the country is successful. That comes up a few times in this segment. But if you believe that his policies are actually not productive for our country and not beneficial for our country, then you don't want him to succeed in implementing those policies. Unless, of course, it's just about your personal relationship with Donald Trump, right? So let's go to this next clip. This is going to be pretty unbelievable. In fact, I'm not even going to set it up. Let's just get into it.
We know this will be a consequential presidency. The question is whether it will be constructive. It will take a new approach from all sides, from both parties, and a leader who can bring them together. And only time will tell if Donald Trump is that leader.
Only time will tell if Donald Trump is the leader to bring us together. You heard that right. Only time will tell if Donald Trump is the leader that will bring us together. How much time does he need? How much time does he need to show us who he is and what he's about and what his style of governance is? How many opportunities does this clown get? And he still is getting a defense like this from supposed allies of the left. I just don't understand. You know, after that, they proceed to say, we're not here to normalize Donald Trump. And then they invite various guests on to normalize Donald Trump. And one of them is David Ignatius from Washington Post. He's the Washington Post columnist. And I kind of wanted to play, a little clip from each person that they had on the panel, but this is going to be the last clip that I play. I'll tell you why in a moment. But I want you to hear from another person they had on this panel And I want you to focus on the message that they are, again, trying to tell you through another voice here about what we need to accept about Donald Trump.
I remember during the first term, at one point, you may not even remember this phone call. I was walking through the airport, and you politely said, every day, Joe, every day it's the same thing on your show. When you can find common ground, talk about it. And I've noticed you do that. I mean, I will tell you, when so many people were in shock, and Mika and I were surprised too after the election result, your first column was talking about how Donald Trump had the possibility to move us closer to peace in the Middle East. I think that was a very important column to write at the time. Again, I was a little surprised when I read it right after the election. But then you follow that up with some really tough columns about the real dangers with his DOD pick and also with Tulsi Gabbard. Is that the type of balancing you're talking about?
It is, Joe. I think we in the news business, in commentary, need to call him as we see him. During Donald Trump's first term, when he did something that I thought made sense, the Abraham Accords between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain are a perfect example. I said without hesitation that I thought this was good for the country, good for the region.
So there were several things in that clip. I think one of the most prominent ones is Donald Trump could bring us closer to peace in the Middle East. I don't understand this. I keep on hearing people talk about this. Donald Trump explicitly said that Netanyahu should finish the job in Gaza. He uses Palestinian as a slur. I guess you think he's going to bring peace in the Middle East if you don't consider certain lives to be valuable. And maybe that's what we're hearing here. I don't know. But there was also this comment of Joe Scarborough getting pushback by being told every day is the same thing on your show. Where you can find common ground, you should be finding common ground. Implicit in that is that every day on his show, there's criticism for Donald Trump and that there should be some element of positivity in order to show that you are making an effort to find common ground. But my question is, why is that important when we are in crisis mode right now? When people that are under Donald Trump's, in his administration now, J.D. Vance, his own vice president, called him America's Hitler. His own top generals have said he's a fascist. Those are headlines. Those are things that you should spend time talking about. And, you know, I can't really name anything positive about Donald Trump right now. But again, when we're in crisis mode and we need to be educating people about the dangers that we face, you don't need to look for areas to have some sort of pseudo-balanced take. That's what got us into this mess in the first place. We need to be real with people. So I wanted to play a clip of other people on the panel, including John Meacham, but he couldn't make a point in like fewer than 10 minutes, so there was no way for me to get a clip for you guys. But they could have used this time to educate us on how Democrats can be working to prevent harm, what they can be doing. And if our differences are more than just petty personal conflicts with Donald Trump, with Republicans, with the Republican Party, and they're actually about differences in values and policy priorities, we should want to stop Donald Trump's policies because we believe they will cause harm. And, you know, 2 days after Donald Trump's election, Senator Elizabeth Warren wrote an article in Time. The title is, "Here's the Plan to Fight Back." And this is an example of the kind of stuff that we should have heard during this panel. I want to read from this article. Quote, "We won't always win, but we can slow or sometimes limit Trump's destruction. With every fight, we can build political power to put more checks on his administration and build the foundation for future wins. Remember that during the first Trump term, mass mobilization, including some of the largest peaceful protests in world history, was the battery that charged the resistance. There is power in solidarity, and we can't win if we don't get in the fight." During the Trump years, Congress stepped up its oversight of his unprecedented corruption and abuses of power. In the Senate, Democrats gave no quarter to radical Trump nominees. We asked tough questions and held the Senate floor for hours to slow down confirmation and expose Republican extremism. These tactics doomed some nominations entirely, laid the groundwork for other cabinet officials to later resign in disgrace, and brought scrutiny that somewhat constrained Trump's efforts. Democrats should also acknowledge that seeking a middle ground with a man who calls immigrants animals and says he will protect women, whether they like it or not, is unlikely to land in a good place. Uniting against Trump's legislative agenda is good politics because it's good policy. It was Democratic opposition to Trump's tax bill that drove Trump's approval ratings to what was then the lowest levels of his administration, forcing Republicans to scrap all mention of the law ahead of the 2018 midterm election and helping spark one of the largest blue waves in recent history. She goes on to talk about how we can fight Trump in the courts, that litigation can slow some of his victories. She also calls on Chuck Schumer to confirm federal judges and use every minute remaining to push, make progress, do what you can. And honestly, maybe no one said it better than Roxane Gay in her recent op-ed in the New York Times, quote, "But to suggest we should yield even a little to Mr. Trump's odious politics, to suggest we should compromise on the rights of trans people for existence, and all the other critical issues we care most about is unacceptable. It is shameful and cowardly. We cannot abandon the most vulnerable communities to assuage the most powerful. Even if we did, it would never be enough. The goalposts would keep moving until progressive politics became indistinguishable from conservative politics. We're halfway there already." I recommend that you read that entire column because it is very, very important. But what is the takeaway from all of this? There are several, right? I mean, they visited Mar-a-Lago and they didn't even do an interview. We had no details. We learned nothing about specifically what was discussed. It seems like it's only about their personal relationship with Donald Trump. And this was 30 minutes, this discussion with this panel. 30 minutes. And it's basically just trust us. We're going to be fair and balanced, right? And the guy who's never shown a willingness to be decent in his entire life, who's 78 now, he seems like he's ready to be decent. Yeah. I think we should reject that whole thing about if Donald Trump isn't successful, our country isn't going to be successful. Because again, when he's wanting to implement policies that harm, we shouldn't want those policies to be implemented. So I don't think we give in. I don't think we stop pushing. I don't think we stop fighting. I think that we try to stave off harm as much as possible. So check out those columns by Roxane Gay, Elizabeth Warren. Those are important things to read, but also independent media is more important now than ever because we need to fight against this. We need to fight against corporate media telling us that it's time to give in and find common ground with Donald Trump. What do you think? I'd love to know. You can call, leave a voicemail at 714-576-4054 or email us at daily@dollemore.com. You can also support this channel by becoming a channel member for as little as $1.99 a month or by going to Patreon at patreon.com/IDoubtItPodcast. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I have 2 more videos coming up after this, and I'm excited for you to see those. Definitely join me on my own channel. Please subscribe over there. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. And as Jesse would say, be genuine and take care of one another.